Field by field, Mazex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Mazex is your source for high-performance soybeans and grain, silage, and grazing corn hybrids. Visit mazex.com to find your local Mazex representative.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hope you had yourself a great week. We had some decent harvest weather in a good part of the province. So we continue to, it's unfortunate, but the more and more farmers that I've been talking to in the past number of weeks, when asking that question, where are your yields relative to the expectation, it tends to be on the downside. It's actually lower than we thought. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all transpires. We talked about last week on the show. There's this is the beginning of harvest. What does the back end look like? And I had one person argue with me this week that actually the back end, the later seeded material might actually be better because it kind of missed some of the heat. We'll have to see. There's lots of variables at play here. But for the most part, at this point, when it comes to the harvest in Saskatchewan, I continue to hear, it's a little bit less than I wanted or thought I was going to get, even considering all the heat that happened in July. But we will see. Okay, today on the program, we're going to be hearing from Chris Davison, the Canola Council of Canada. Of course, some bad news this week when it came to the canola markets. Tuesday, limit down, punished badly. And that's all because China has, as expected, is retaliating to some regard in terms of the tariffs that the Canadian government is putting on Chinese-made EVs, 100% tariff, as well as a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum coming out of China. And this was expected. Now, let's just be clear. This is a different situation than we saw when they pulled the export licenses of Viterra and Richardson's. This is basically just saying, hey, we're doing an anti-dumping investigation. So canola can still trade. I think it added some friction to the trading lanes, but canola can still be shipped to China. But this investigation is underway. We're going to hear from Chris Davison, the Canola Council of Canada, to get their perspective on it. We've also got a product spotlight today with SeedMaster. We're talking to Tim Criddle about some of the things. They've got actually a really cool new challenge going on that we're going to hear about. And then we're going to finish up talking about fertilizer, because this is one of the main things on top of your mind as we think about this 25 crop. We're going to hear from Chris Meyer of ADM talking about fertilizer prices and just try to get a sense of the direction. They've been fairly sticky. And we've seen it in our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We've also seen it this week in the Purdue CME Ag Barometer in the U.S. The two main reasons that farmers are feeling down on their profitability or their opportunity for profit: sliding commodity prices and sticky input prices. Yes, input prices have not fallen to the same extent that commodities have. And that has been definitely an issue. If you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Now, earlier this week on the RealAg Radio podcast, I talked to Jenna Gregoire. She is a pioneer area agronomist in the Battleford region. Here's what she said about crop conditions.
I've been hearing kind of everything under the sun. A lot of guys thought that the crop looked really good. So there was a lot of hope that, with all that rain we had in June, that it was going to equate to yield in September. But it's kind of the opposite thing's been happening. So those 3 weeks of intense heat that hit us in July, and I mean intense heat, like it was heat warning for 3 weeks solid. They really kind of set the illusion that the crop looked good, but there's not as much in the crop as the combines start rolling. So hopefully maybe there's some change as things progress, but so far the yields that have been coming off have been anywhere from about 25 to 35 on canola, and then a couple on the higher end at 40, but I would say 40 is kind of a bang up crop this year, all things considered.
And for those of you that are listening that are outside the canola growing region, like we're shooting for sure 50 above, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon for Northwest Sask to be getting 60, 65, even some 70s consistently if it was a normal growing year. And what's normal these days? I don't know. Nothing seems to be normal in the last 5 years, but I would say on average that those yields would be considered normal.
Would love to hear about your crop conditions and how harvest is progressing for you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Okay, what we're going to do next here on Real Ag on the Weekend is we're going to take a break, and then we're going to hear from Chris Davison of the Canola Council of Canada. A lot has happened this week in the world of canola in China. Some concerning things, but not unexpected events transpiring here. Did China throw us a bone? Did they buy us some time to maybe reverse our decision on tariffs? And will Canada do that? We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Important notice for grain farmers, the Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Purely Canada Foods Corporation. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. A message from the Government of Canada.
Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to be hearing from Chris Davison with the Canola Council of Canada, Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture. She caught up to Chris Davison on Tuesday afternoon. Let's hear what Chris had to what he had to say about the situation.
Right. Joining me now is Chris Davison. He's President and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada. Chris, it has been a bit of a roller coaster of a day, certainly, starting with the news this morning from China with a retaliation to Canada announcing EV tariffs. And we've seen this before where canola especially, but Canadian ag products get caught up at times in some of this politicking. What is the latest? What do we know so far as to China's announcement today?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lindsay. You're right. It's been a busy day leading off with this communication from the Chinese government. What I would say to start is while there has been an investigation that's been announced, we haven't seen any details about what that investigation is going to look like, other than an indication that it is seed focused. But in terms of the duration, the scope, the process, etc., that, to the best of our knowledge, has not been communicated yet.
Okay. Now, we have seen certainly in the past where Canadian canola has faced at times other trade barriers, phytosanitary issues, etc. However, China has announced this is an anti-dumping investigation. What might that entail as far as what they might be looking at, as far as the numbers from Canada? What does an investigation like that even entail?
Yeah, so look, we don't have any indication of what numbers might look like. And I want to be clear that as part of the announcements that we all saw today, this was one of several different measures that were positioned as a response to actions taken by the federal government that you alluded to. Some of those, it was suggested, will involve the WTO, and others will, it would seem, involve the domestic Chinese government. And typically, when we're talking about anti-dumping, that's typically where a domestic government imposes tariffs on imports for reasons related to market value, etc. So that's about all that we know at this point in time, as I said. And so we will obviously be tracking this very closely to see what else we learn about the investigation itself. What I will say, even with what we know today, is we will support the investigation as appropriate to demonstrate, the fair access and competitiveness of Canadian canola. We need to learn more about the process, as I said, but certainly we will be there to participate and support in an appropriate way.
Now, one of the key things, of course, you've mentioned is at this point, this is the announcement of an investigation. This isn't an announcement of any sort of tariff or anything that has been applied. That becomes, though, of course, an unknown. We are, of course, in the thick of harvest here in Western Canada and of this canola crop. Certainly from the farmer's perspective, makes them quite nervous, but I would imagine from a grain company's perspective as well. What could this mean? Could we see companies having perhaps less confidence in making sales to China, knowing that this is ongoing, or how does the industry sort of digest this news?
Yeah, so obviously, I think it's safe to say that probably everyone in the canola value chain would be disappointed with this action. I'm also going to say that, again, depending on where this process goes, though, that we're also confident that an investigation into Canada's canola trade will certainly demonstrate alignment with and reinforce our support for rules-based trade, which I think is really, really important. And that gets back to the heart of your question, because certainly farmers and the rest of the value chain want to avoid unpredictability when it comes to access to markets. And so our job one, as it always is, but takes on more importance in situations like this, has got to be about maintaining or restoring open and predictable market access for, in this instance, Canadian canola. And that has to be a priority for us. And that's what we're going to be talking about with the membership and the broader industry, engaging with the federal government and others in terms of how best to do that.
Okay. All right, Chris Davison, thank you so much. I know this has been a fast-moving story, so I do appreciate your time, and we'll be updating as we can on this. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Appreciate Chris Davison giving us some time there to discuss, what exactly is at work here. It looks like there's a lot more information still to come to the forefront for us to better understand how all this plays out. Is this something that can be rectified? Like, it is a decision made on this in 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, 24, 36? And who's making that decision? Is this a decision that's being made inside China, or is this the decision that's going to go to the WTO? That, I think that's an incredibly important component of this. That's one of the pieces to really watch. It is very much in Canada's favor if this is something that is decided by the WTO. Okay? And I'm not saying that because I think the WTO is more likely to side with Canada than China. I think it gives Canada a little bit of a more fair shake at talking about the finer points of the details here of their position and what's really at work here. Now, if this is a decision and the judge and jury are domestically in China and this is just something they can rule on, well, then we got a different problem. We got a bigger problem. All of a sudden, Canada's stance on fair rules-based trade, I'm not sure we're going to get a very objective sort of jury, so to speak. So I think watch that. Where's the decision being made? And those details, I've seen different media outlets reporting different things or speculating on different things. And Chris sounded unsure there as well. So that's the key to watch. Another key is, how does the Canadian government react? Now, what we heard out of different, like the trade minister and the minister of agriculture, is we've heard that Canada believes in rules-based trade. Okay, so that's one thing. But do they back off of these tariffs, these 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs? I almost said RVs, but they're EVs, electric vehicles, and a 25% tariff on Chinese-made steel and aluminum. Do they back off of that position? I'm doubtful of that, because we not only do we have the government of Canada that has made this decision, we've also got the opposition party. The Conservatives are just as in favor, it seems, as the Liberals are on this policy. So I know there's a lot of people running around saying that, look what Trudeau did to us, but Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, has the same position. And there may be some nuance there, but was tweeting last week about how he supports the idea because both parties are really going after the union vote, auto sector and steel and aluminum sector. So that's the narrative. So I don't see that changing at this point. Okay. One of the other pieces that Lindsay didn't get into with Chris due to time constraints was the longer this goes on, the more the market goes to the downside. Do we start to see some sort of talk more and more about compensation for growers? That's another piece of this that I think maybe too early as of this week, but it's something that could build over time depending on how low that canola future goes. So all stuff to be paying attention to and staying on top of as this story continues to develop. And how do the Americans react to all of this? Or do they move and do something to, in retaliation on Canada's behalf? I'm not as certain of that. I don't expect them to do that, although Canada, the main reason for doing this was union jobs and falling in line with what the Americans were doing themselves as a trade strategy. It's just Canada's getting the retaliation. So we'll have to watch what the U.S. does on this front. There's a lot of moving parts here. One of the moving parts is the markets, and canola was down like $48, $50 a ton this week. That's less than ideal as we're into the harvest season. I chatted with Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research to get a sense of what does this mean for your marketing strategy. Here's what Chuck had to say. Okay, so from the farmer's perspective, reaction to this, keep our wits about us. Obviously, we want to stay disciplined. No need to panic, but we're long inventory. And everybody has a different amount that is unsold, some zero, and some probably have sold the majority of their crop. What do farmers do here right now as we trade off of 576 in November? We're at the pretty close to the 1 year low here. What do we do now?
I think it is being patient. I think it's still being patient. That's what we've been telling people is to be patient even before this happened. I think that's still the case. I think this has a longer time frame, and so we don't need to panic, as you said. And I think there's still room for that. We're strong on thinking in terms of seasonal price behavior. So we're at the seasonal lows now.
You can hear my full discussion with Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research, get his reaction on what is at play here from a marketing perspective relative to this announcement this week by China. You can find that at RealAgriculture.com. Some great weekend listening right there for you to engage in. And Chuck really talks about the need to be patient. Do not jump to conclusions. Right? There's a bit of a long tail here to this. We got to see Canada, how they react. We haven't seen much of a response from the Canadian government at this point. They've put out a few platitudes and a few comments, but the question is there any action that is attached to it, as we talked about earlier? And this is all happening over top of a market that's trying to find some bottoms, trying to find some stability, something to bounce off of here. And this news on canola has not helped whatsoever. If you're cheering, like we talked about, if you're cheering for there to be reversal on these tariffs, which, I interviewed Philippe Rio, who is the director of the China Institute at the University of Alberta. And he sees this as a bit of an opportunity, China's left a little bit of a window here because this investigation is going to take some time. They just didn't jump to tariffs. They've left a bit of an open window here for Canada to maybe reconsider their position, and maybe there's an opportunity here for discussion. We'll have to see. That interview as well is posted at RealAgriculture.com. It's about 30 minutes, and it is fantastic. Philip he was in China for 25 years as a Canadian diplomat. He knows China like no other. So check out that interview as well. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to hear a product spotlight with Tim Criddle from SeedMaster. They got an interesting challenge that they're putting out to growers. We'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The following is a paid-for product spotlight by SeedMaster. We're joined right now by SeedMaster's Global Director. It is Tim Criddle. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Shaun. And yourself?
Hey, doing very well. So, Tim, let's start off. There's this cool new program you got going at SeedMaster. It is called the Ultra Wheat Yield Guarantee. What is this?
Well, Shaun, I can tell you that we've had over the years, for about 5 years now, that we've had the Ultra SR in the market. We have a lot of interest in the product. We go to a show, we go to field days, and people are clamoring to it because, really in the last 10, 15 years, there's been not a lot new developed for the seeding industry, tweaks to sizes and capacities. But the Ultra SR is really a revolutionary seeding solution. It's like a hybrid between an air drill and a planter, in that you've got a single pass air drill machine. You put your nutrients down at the seed at the same time, but you get that ultra pro metering with that seed singulation. And so people are looking at it saying that's a really cool solution. And they say, we have no doubt that that's going to be fantastic in canola. It's going to be fantastic in pulses. But then they run into a mental roadblock when it comes to cereals. And they say, gosh, I'm not sure that the Ultra SR is going to be a solution for me in cereals because it's at 15-inch spacing. And really, the fallacy there is born of the fact that a lot of the yield data related to row spacing goes back, a lot of that data goes back to the 80s, back when there were more conventional tillage practices. Since then, I mean, we've got direct seeding, we've got far better soil profiles in terms of moisture preservation and nutrient management. And it's a fallacy to assume automatically that 15-inch spacing is going to yield less than 7.5, 10, or 12. And our owners have been proving this year after year after year. They say, you know what, I'm just not getting that yield drag that I worried that I was going to have. As a matter of fact, I'm actually outperforming some of my neighbors. That's happening. So we thought, well, for all those customers that are right on the fence and they say, I want to believe, I truly want to believe, but I'm really worried about yield in my wheat, we said, well, look, let's guarantee it. Let's put together a wheat yield guarantee. And the way the program is going to work is that a farmer can buy a brand new 2025 model year Ultra SR, and they can sign up to the program where they can allocate a quarter section of land, 160 acres. They can divide that in half, and they can seed half of that with the Ultra SR, and they can seed the other half with a drill of their choice, with the spacing of their choice. And at the end of the year, we're going to verify which half out-yielded the other. Now, if the Ultra SR out-yields the other one, great. I mean, it's what we anticipated. If the Ultra SR has a yield shortage compared to the other half of the field, we'll actually pay the farmer the difference. We'll make it up to them. Now, we'll make sure that the seeding rate or the nutrient package is the same for both. We want to be there on the day, seeded at the same time, all the normal parameters. But again, this is just our way of saying, look, the market needs to understand that yield drag that people think is going to be there, it's really not. And if that's the biggest roadblock to getting into one of these, then let's remove that barrier.
Yeah, a little bit of competition, Tim. I like it. And this is you standing behind the product, putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Well, it's bold and audacious, but it needs to be. I mean, we feel like it's incorrectly being shoehorned into being just a canola drill, and it's not just a canola drill; it's an everything drill. And the farmers that own them are running them, and that are growing fantastic crops across the board. They're believers, and we're really happy when they come out and say good things about it. But we just figured we just needed to punch our message up a little bit and stand behind it with a guarantee. So,
from your perspective at SeedMaster, why should farmers choose the Ultra SR? Why is it a solution that they really should be considering?
Well, it's an overall, tremendously efficient seeding solution. There are a lot of reasons to look at it, and they're not all related to, say, wheat yields. I guess number one is that there's a tremendous savings to be had because it is like a hybrid between an air drill and a planter, in that we get planter-like singulation, near zero seed mortality. So right off the hop, you're looking at probably $30 an acre savings just in canola alone. Plus, you're going to grow a fantastic canola crop. You're not going to sacrifice in any other crops that you're going to grow, cereals or pulses. The capital cost is lower than a toolbar and an air cart. So you've got some iron savings right up front. Horsepower requirements are lower than pulling a conventional drill with a toolbar and a new cart. So that probably means you don't have to go up and buy a new $1 million tractor as well. So add up all of those savings, fuel savings, time savings, efficiencies. You've got a 60-foot drill, 750 bushel capacity. So it's not like you've sacrificed anything there. And unlike a planter, it's a single pass air drill. You manage your nutrient package at the exact same time as you're seeding. So you're not looking at making additional passes. So just all around, from an efficiency point of view, the ability to grow a fantastic crop and not actually sacrifice anything along the way makes the Ultra SR an ideal seeding solution in Western Canada.
Listen, if you want to find out more about the Ultra SR, you can go to seedmaster.ca, or, of course, talk to your local dealer of SeedMaster equipment. Hey, Tim, thanks so much for joining us here today.
It's always a pleasure, Shaun. Thank you.
It's the Global Director for SeedMaster, Tim Criddle, and, of course, was a paid-for product spotlight by SeedMaster. When we come back, we're going to talk about fertilizer prices. Yes! Chris Meyer will be with us. Bernd Tobin from Real Agriculture was down at the Farm Progress Show and had a chance to talk to Chris about what is happening with fertilizer prices from ADM's perspective. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Protect your anhydrous ammonia and bottom line even if temperatures hit 15 degrees or below. That's not too late to apply agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro nitrogen stabilizer. Learn more at centuro.ca.
At the Farm Progress Show in Boone, Iowa, Bernd Tobin of Real Agriculture, he had a chance to stop at the ADM booth and caught up with Chris Meyer from their fertilizer division, and they talked about commodity prices and what's happening in the fertilizer market. Let's listen to that conversation.
catching up with Chris Meyer from ADM Farm Direct Fertilizer. Chris, how's it going? How's the show?
So far has been awesome. A lot of people coming through. Definitely a lot of questions on fertilizer for sure. But yeah, so far so good.
Now, Chris, I want to talk about some of those questions you're getting from farmers, and I'm sure a lot of them are about, how they can navigate a down commodity market, and some sticky and stubborn, input prices. But before we get there, hey, tell us a little about Farm Direct Fertilizer and, how you work with growers.
Sure. So ADM has been in the fertilizer business for 20 some odd years, and about 8 years ago they started to go to a farm direct model. As growers have gotten bigger, more complex, they've been looking to go into the market and source their own products and kind of control that price a little bit. And so ADM gladly kind of stepped into that marketplace and made sure that growers had that opportunity to do so.
Awesome. Now let's dig into the market here. I mean, your perception right now where we are, where is the fertilizer market?
Yeah, so if we look at potash, potash has actually probably been at one of the most affordable levels it's been at in quite a long time. Seems to be ample supply, and it's really kind of a decent price to the growers this year, which is kind of a little different. If we go to phosphates, the United States has a little problem because we've got some countervailing duties that have made it difficult for us to source nitrogen from many places in the world. The Canadian market doesn't have those tariffs, but in general, those prices have come down from the years past too.
Yeah, now a big part of this, conversation is the commodity markets, the farm economy. How do those two run into each other? Corn and soybean prices and fertilizer prices right now.
Right, so it's definitely a conversation piece we've been having a lot more with growers because in certain situations, the numbers don't work well with where the corn price is at. And so it's really one of those things where growers got to know, what their fertility levels are, where they can sell their crop at, and what makes the most sense as far as if you're going to cut back, what does that do to the crop in general when you come to the end? And you want to make sure that you maximize the yields that you can get and maximize that return on what you are going to put in there.
Yeah, and so much of that is actually knowing what you got in the ground from a fertilizer perspective, right? And then finding that key point of where profitability meets yield, right?
Right, and it's, I've got a lot of folks that have done a good job of fertilizing in the years past. And so with the lower prices, that's what they're thinking. They're, hey, I'm going to cut back a little bit. Things that might throw that off a little is if they have, there's some areas that have really good crops this year. And with those good crops, of course, they're taking off more nutrient than they probably have in the past. So you've got to analyze that and kind of figure out what's my right replacement rate and how much do I feel comfortable knowing that's, what levels are in my ground.
Yeah. Hey, you're talking to a lot of farmers, you say, how are those conversations these days? We're looking into fall, we're looking into some harvest, difficult situations. What are they saying to you? What are they asking you from an advice perspective?
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of it's just where we think prices are going, especially by spring. And it makes it a little challenging because today when we've got pricing where it's at, again, potash isn't too bad. Phosphates, guys are a little weary on it. And then they're watching the markets kind of, I don't want to say fall apart, but they're going the wrong direction for most growers. And so it's just really, they just need to figure out where the break-evens are for next year and what makes sense and where to optimize their money that they're going to spend.
Yeah. A final point on strategy, and that is, you book for 12 months here is your window. How do you tell farmers, to look at that window right now? I mean, maybe a little tough to lock in early here.
Yeah, so earlier in the summer we had some opportunities, we think, to lock in phosphates and potash going into this fall. So far they look like those are pretty good choices. Going into next spring, it's really tough. When we talk nitrogen, a lot of the guys are telling me that number doesn't make sense where it's at today. I'm just going to kind of sit on my hands and wait. And quite frankly, I think a lot of folks are going to wait on phosphates and potash as well. Again, part of it is in a higher interest environment too. They don't want to have the cash outlay, on the farm and pay the interest on that money. If we don't think prices are going to dramatically go up, they'll just sit back and wait for those opportunities to come forth.
That was Chris Meyer of ADM. Some great insights there, talking about the overall fertilizer market. Sticking with fertilizer, and during the rail strike back a couple weeks ago, that seems like a lifetime ago after what's happened this week with canola and China, is we were talking a lot about the fact that railways had stopped shipping anhydrous ammonia, like 2 weeks before the work stoppage actually happened. There was concern about getting it onto the ground. Well, that's not the only thing that's kind of been very disruptive to the anhydrous ammonia market. I heard a clip from the Farm for Profit podcast. Josh Linville of StoneX was on there. Here's his commentary related to anhydrous ammonia.
Who do you think was the largest anhydrous exporter in the world as of about 2 years ago?
Russia.
Russia. Guess how many tons they're exporting right now?
0. Wow.
Because their pipeline that they would run down to Odessa, it kind of goes through Ukraine. The nation that's being invaded isn't real thrilled about letting them use a pipeline to go make money off of an export like that. So that pipeline's been completely shut down. I will say, I've gotten that question a lot. Why is it more expensive this year than it was last year? And I'll tell you, last year's price was a gift. What I mean by that is it was much, much lower than anybody anticipated. It was to the point where I started to hear the price, and I called my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, how's it going? Yada, yada, yada. Buy your anhydrous. Well, I don't have a price yet. Well, what price are you thinking I should buy? I said buy your anhydrous. Take what they tell you, and you buy it. When you look at that price versus where the corn was, to your point, it was $5+ a bushel. One of the best ratio values we've ever seen in the history of the data that we have.
That was Josh Linville of the Farm for Profit podcast. You know, you look this week at the CME Purdue Ag Barometer that came out, and it's what they do in the U.S. to measure farm sentiment regarding profitability and a bunch of other factors. It's what we based our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index off of here in Canada with Real Agri Studies. And for the farmers that are concerned about current and future farm financial performance, no surprise, very similar to Canada. What are they concerned about? Two things. Just take the cake. Commodity prices on the way down and high input prices. And I think this makes it one of the most difficult decisions on the 25 crop. What do you do about fertilizer now for the 25 crop that you're not going to be planting until, March, April, May? Right? We got a lot of duration risk. And typically this is the time that historically, going back way, this is when you'd be making some of those moves, and probably some of you have made moves already. Now, in an ideal world, you would buy the fertilizer, sell some crop, and you'd match a little bit. You do some matching. That is really hard to do right now. You know you're going to need the fertilizer, but do you really feel good about these prices right now? And in 12 months from now, we'll ultimately know. Like, if you could go back in time, you'd probably sell a lot of the 24 crop in the fall of 23. Right? The prices were a lot higher than they are today. Where we are 12 months from now, well, that's the big question, and nobody really knows. But the stickiness and the geopolitical side of the fertilizer equation has kept some of those prices propped up. And we always know that input prices do not. It's not just like, you think about going back to the fall of 2020, the commodity market shut up. Input prices did not track. They didn't follow. There was a bit of a delay. It wasn't right together. On the way down, it's kind of the same sort of thing. It's not matched, and that's really hurting farm profitability right now. Big concerns in Canada and the U.S. when it comes to farm profitability in the cropping sector. Of course, as we've been discussing here on the RealAg on the weekend, cattle, livestock, it's different. People feeling a little bit better about themselves, and that's easily explained and well understood. So, hey, I'd love your feedback on this topic. What are you doing on fertilizer? What's your thoughts? We're going to be going out to the Real Agri Studies Insights panel here in September and asking some questions about this. But you can get a jump on it by sending me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. What do you think needs to happen here? What's the best decision when it comes to your questions around fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus, things like that? Potash, obviously not as big of an issue here like it is in the Corn Belt. But what are you doing on phos and nitrogen? What's your intentions, and how does that relate to maybe this is a good time right now to buy? It doesn't feel that way on fertilizer at all, but want your perspectives, okay? Once again, that email is shaney@realagriculture.com. Hey, I appreciate everybody joining us here today on Real Ag on the Weekend. Make sure you check out realagriculture.com to keep up to date on all things in agricultural news. Appreciate it, and thank you so much for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag on the Weekend.